Welcome to Mindsets to Methods, the podcast for teenagers and their parents, with teen coach ArthurCWoods and Elizabeth Joy Woods.
Hey, Elizabeth Joy.
Hey, what's up?
You know what I believe?
Tell me.
I believe, and this is going to be controversial.
Here we go.
Okay, here's what I believe. Every teenager, all of them, is a leader. Now, if you're a parent listening to this, maybe you just thought, oh, Arthur, my friend, you have not met my teenager. I can assure you, not every teenager is a leader. And you, my listener, are welcome to that opinion. You know your teenager far greater than I do. I probably don't know your teenager. But I'm going to stick to my guns here and say, fundamentally speaking, I believe every teenager is a leader. And over the next few minutes, I would like for us to talk about why that is true.
I like it. Let's do it.
Okay, so normally we don't do it this way, but I'm going to actually tell you the 3 points, uno, dos, tres, the 3 points that we're going to go over today, just to give you a hint of where we're going. So, sound good?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. Number 1, and this is for the teenagers listening. You have influence. The second point is you are a leader. And then the third point is you as a teenager have a responsibility to be a quality leader. You have influence, you're a leader, you have a responsibility to be a quality leader. So why don't we start with that first point? You have influence. What is influence, Elizabeth Joy?
I love it. So influence is the ability to create change in human behavior.
So we certainly have that power.
Yes.
All the parents listening have that power.
Correct.
And all the teenagers listening have that power.
I would agree.
Because at the end of the day, every teenager listening has the ability to influence someone, has the ability to create change in someone's behavior.
Yep.
So our question to the teens and parents listening is, over whom do you currently have influence? So think about like the people in your relational world, your family, your friends, the people with whom you go to school, the people with whom you work. Like, who are the people that you currently have influence over? You have some names in your head? Do you have some names in your head?
Yeah,
I have
for sure.
some names in my head.
100%. Yeah.
And it can go both ways too, because you certainly have influence over me, and I think I have influence over you.
I'll never admit it.
Okay, all right, that's fair. That's fair. This is being recorded forever, so please don't admit that at all. And so maybe a follow-up question to over whom do you currently have influence is, who currently has influence over you?
Yeah, I love that question because it really makes you pay attention to what's going on. So who do you have influence over and who has influence over you? And of course, what is that influence?
Yeah, exactly. So my point in bringing this up is to just have each of us listening, teenagers included, admit to the fact that, yes, we have influence. Of course we have influence.
Right.
We all have influence
Right.
over someone, whether it's a big, significant, huge amount of influence or an itty-bitty micro level of influence. We all have influence over someone. And there's really 3 types of influence as we look at it. The first one is just kind of that unintentional influence where
Right.
you're not in any way strategic about it. You're not in any way intentional about it. You just kind of live your life, and however people are influenced by you, so be it. That could be good, that could be bad, that could be neutral.
Right.
You're just kind of living your life, not worrying about your influence on other people.
And unintentional, you might not even be aware that someone is influencing you or that you are influencing other people. So yeah.
Exactly. And so the second type of influence then is intentional positive. And this would be the level of influence that I think we would kind of advocate for in this podcast. Would be you're actually thinking through, over who do I have influence and how can I be a positive influence over that person? So if you're a teenager, maybe you're thinking of your younger siblings. Maybe you're thinking of your peers or your friends or Just again, looking through your relational world and thinking, I want to have a positive influence over these people, and I want to be really intentional and strategic about making that happen.
I love that.
And then the third one, and this is kind of the opposite of the one we just talked about, is intentional negative. And we definitely don't advocate for this one.
No.
This is where you're kind of being a bully or maybe a little bit of a jerk, or you're recognizing that you have influence over people and you're intentionally going out of your way to be like a negative influence.
So I completely agree with that. But I also want to say that there is an intentional negative when, like, so you're not walking across someone, that would be painful, but you're meeting someone in the hallway and you're like, hey, how are you today? And they're like, well, I'm here. Not what I was going for there with the, hey, how are you today? Or,
so you don't like the Debbie Downer?
I'm not a fan of Debbie. I'm not a fan of Debbie. Mostly because I'm not a Debbie. I have
Yes.
more energy and I'm a happier person when I choose that. You know what I mean? And it is a choice. So I'm going to say absolutely you can be intentionally negative, and it can be like as hardcore and obvious as, hey, I'm a bully. Or it could just be you're a Debbie. So maybe don't be Debbie. No offense to all the Debbies out there.
Yeah. If your name is Debbie, we like you. Just
don't be a downer.
Don't be a downer. Come on. Be happy, Debbie.
So if you are Debbie or if you're not Debbie, which type of influence do you feel you most exhibit?
Yeah.
And how?
Exactly. So as you think about unintentional influence, you think about positive intentional influence, and you think about negative intentional influence. Which type do you influence? Do you exhibit the most? I don't know. What do you think about yourself?
Oh, I definitely feel like I'm intentionally positive.
Okay.
I mean, for sure.
Yeah, I would have been
go out of my way to try and be an intentionally positive leader.
I would have been very surprised if you were like, I'm intentionally negative. My goal here is to just ruin people's lives. I will use my influence for evil.
I'm not like Jafar from Aladdin.
No, exactly. And we joke, but there are people that, whether they like to admit it or not, but there are people who do have that level of influence where they're really being negative with it. And I would just encourage that person to just think, hey, what does it look like for you to maybe influence people in a positive, healthy, way?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think for me too, in answering the question, which type of influence do you most exhibit? I would say I'm probably intentional positive as well, with some elements of unintentional. So yeah, that's kind of our first of 3 points. You have influence. So whether you're a teenager or the parent of a teenager, I want you to just truly believe that you have influence over somebody in your life.
Somebody. Oh, you get a song with this podcast.
That's exactly right. We can't afford to buy that song.
Number 2, you are a leader.
Yeah, you are a leader. So here's the connection we're going to make between point number 1 and point number 2. Here's our definition of leadership. Leadership is the application of, here's the word we've been talking about so far, influence. Leadership is the application of influence. All that means is if you have influence, which we just said we all do, then by default, you are also a leader. Don't believe me? John Maxwell, one of the greatest leadership coaches and gurus that's ever walked this earth, he says this: leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
Love that.
Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And if you're like, wow, I don't like John, well, Ken Blanchard says the key to successful leadership is influence, not authority.
Yeah.
So often we think of leadership as it's a position. You have a position of leadership. You have a position of authority.
You're the boss.
Exactly. And certainly there are times where we are given positions of leadership, but we're not talking about that today. We're talking about what leadership is at its core is nothing more than influence.
Yeah.
And we all have influence, so we all are leaders.
Yep.
So basically there's 3 types of leadership that we want to take a moment and think through. And the first one is this: leading up. And that basically means that you are leading, and this is kind of weird, but you are leading the people who have positional leadership over you. So your bosses, your teachers, your parents, these people who have authority over you or a position of leadership over you, you're getting to lead up to them. Now, they still have that authority over you. You still need to approach that style of leadership with respect and humility, understanding that they have the authority over you. But that doesn't mean that you can't lead up. That doesn't mean that you can't influence them. That doesn't mean that what you say and how you live can't influence the people and can't lead the people who are leading over you.
Yeah, I love that.
And so that was leading up. The second one is leading across. So this is, if you're a teenager, this is typically your friends, your peers, maybe your siblings. These are people who you don't necessarily have any authority over, and they don't necessarily have any authority over you, but you have the ability to lead them. You have the ability to influence them. So yeah, and in the case of a teenager, that would most likely be your friendship circle. What does it look like for you to exercise leadership amongst your friend group? So that's leading across. So we had leading up and leading across. And then leading down is our final one. And this is when you have actually been put in a position of authority, when you've been put in a position of leadership, and now you're leading the people beneath you. And I say beneath, we're not talking about anyone's value as a person. We're all equal in that regard, but just positionally speaking, the role that you have as an authority figure, as a leadership figure, this is you now leading down, leading the people that you have been entrusted to lead. I think for me, where I am right now, where I fall on this is probably leading down. As a life coach and as a speaker, I get to speak into the lives of a lot of teenagers, a lot of parents, a lot of families. And while that's not necessarily a position of authority, there is a kind of position of leadership that I take over them. And so I do get to lead down in that regard. But I think also to some leading across, I absolutely do that. You and I are equals, but we both lead across with each other. And so, yeah, it's pretty possible, pretty likely, I would say, that if you're listening to this, whether you're a teen or a parent, that you experience at least 2 or even 3 of these types of leadership on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think it's very easy just in an educational setting to be a teen and lead up, lead across, and lead down all in the same day.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. So parents, at the beginning of this podcast, I said every teenager is a leader. And some of you, I could hear your voices from in my head. I could hear you saying, yes, I agree with you, Arthur. And I could hear some of you saying, no, Arthur, you're crazy. You don't know my teenager. So to those who said, no, Arthur, you're crazy. You don't know my teenager. Again, what we're doing here is just trying to build a case that your teenager, yes, even your teenager is in fact a leader. Number 1, they have influence. Number 2, by virtue of that influence, they are a leader. And then our third point.
Number 3, you, as someone with influence who is a leader, you have a responsibility to be a quality leader.
Yeah, exactly. Jim Rohn says this. I like this quote. If you want to be a leader who attracts quality people, the key is to become a person of quality yourself.
So brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
And so simple.
So brilliant.
So needed to be said.
Yes. If you want to be a leader who attracts quality people, the key is to become a person of quality yourself. Let's talk about some attributes of a quality leader. One of the attributes of a quality leader is certainly confidence, but it's confidence without arrogance.
That's tricky.
And that is tricky. It really is believing in yourself, feeling like you can do the thing that you've been called to do without making it all about you, without just becoming fully arrogant, and just confidence. Some good confidence is really an attractive quality in a leader.
I agree. But you also have to prove your competency.
Yes.
Your second C.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just about thinking that you can do the job, thinking that you can lead, but actually being competent enough to actually do
so.
the job.
Yep.
So competency is a big one. Character, oh yeah, that's a big one for these days in particular. Is the person that you're showing in public congruent with the person that you are in private? Is your character in a good place, or is your character in a less than good place?
Yep.
Confidence, competency, character. And the fourth one I would say is concern. Our fourth kind of C is concern. Do you have a concern for the people that you lead? And boy, we have some good leaders in this country, on this planet, who you can tell genuinely have concern for the people they lead. And then we have a lot of leaders as well who their concern is all about themselves and not about the people that they've been entrusted to lead.
Another attribute of a quality leader, and one of my favorites, would be communication. And I mean, we just spoke about that in our last podcast, how important it is to communicate. But it has been few and far between where I've had positive, bosses and or leaders in my personal career that have valued communication and been good at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's such, like I said, it's on our last podcast, it's such a formative social skill that can really kind of blow up your career in a great way. So I think communication is super important as you become a quality leader.
Yeah, big time. So confidence, competency, character, concern, and communication. So my question to those of you listening, which of the attributes do you need to work on the most? And maybe it's not even that list. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm really good with confidence, competency, character, concern, and communication. But maybe there's another characteristic in your leadership, or as you think about becoming a leader, maybe there's another characteristic that you need to work on. What is that for you? And what can you even do in the next several days to begin working on that?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think if you're concerned about what you might need to work on and you don't know, ask someone who's close to you. Teens, ask your parent. Ask your teens. I mean, you both can love each other well enough to be honest with each other in this possibly difficult conversation that could be really beneficial.
Sure. All right. So number one, you have influence. Every teenager, every parent, you have influence over someone. You have influence. Number two, you're a leader. By virtue of your influence, you are a leader. We all have influence. Therefore, we all are leaders, because leadership is nothing more than the application of influence. You have influence. You are a leader. And number three, you have a responsibility to be a quality leader. And I can tell you this, the world needs way more quality leaders. And hopefully today's podcast gives you some encouragement to head in that direction and develop into the quality leader that we all know you can be.
Cool. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, leaders.
Yeah. Thanks, leaders. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Mindsets to Methods podcast with your hosts, ArthurCWoods and Elizabeth Joy Woods. For more information, please visit their website at ArthurCWoods.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram at ArthurCWoods.